Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And today I thought I would do a wrap up for everything I read in September. I used to do these and then I kind of stopped doing them. So I'm going to try to do these again just so I can kind of see whether or not this is something that people are interested in. If you guys enjoy my monthly wrap ups, or if you just prefer I do something else, and if I read a good book during the month, I'll do a review or something on it. So a lot of people do monthly wrap-ups, but I have stopped. So this is my second chance. So let's just get into it. September was not a great reading month for me. I felt like crap for like the majority of September. Like my health was just all over the place, or my brain fog was up because I had to do all those medical appointments. And anyways, I did not get as many books done as I normally would. I got about 14 books, I think. So I will be kind of starting where I left off last time. So there was a few early on in September. I did a video about everything that I'd been reading. And let's just start for the books that I had said I started reading but hadn't finished yet. So starting off with Shadows 2. That was the anthology book I was reading, and I finished that. Absolutely amazing. I think this is probably one of my favorite anthologies. I absolutely love the Shadow series, edited by Charles L. Grant. So many good stories in here. So many interesting stories. A lot of really, really scary stories in here. Things that, like, genuinely unnerved me and, like, made me, like, whoa. Gave me the creeps. Which is something that I found out that I think I can get way more scared with quiet horror than I can with, like, loud, bombastic horror. So it seems like if I want to actually be scared, I probably need to read like ghost stories and stuff that's a little bit more subtle, because subtleties are the scariest for me. So absolutely would recommend this if you haven't read them. I'm willing to bet all the Shadows books are good, but I've only read 1 and 2, and both of them are great. I will continue reading them in the months ahead because I have up to 9 currently. So yeah, I got a lot of content out of Shadows 2 this month, so needless to say, I quite enjoyed that anthology. Next up is Bloodworm, which I was about halfway through when I did that video about what I was reading. It doesn't quite... Bloodworm by John Halkin didn't quite land, mainly because there were some very ridiculous reveals as to what the quote-unquote bloodworms were. By the end, though, I did really enjoy it. I did think this was a fun Animal Attacks books overall. I just think that maybe the beginning half is a bit stronger than the latter half, because it really ramps everything up super quick and doesn't give it enough time to breathe. Could probably use about another 50 pages or so to really get into the its and bits of the apocalypse that happens when the bloodworms show up and how everyone deals with it and stuff like that. Which is like in comparison to like Rats, which I think is the most comparable book to this that I've read, at least. Rats has, like, I would say a good like 50 pages devoted to the like rats are everywhere, we are dealing with the like societal collapse due to the rats, whereas Bloodworm seemed to kind of shove it all in like the last like 25 pages. Like it needed a little bit more time to breathe for those segments. But overall, I did think this was fun. A lot of people hate this book. I think this is a fun book. I gave it 3 stars. It's nothing that's going to blow your mind, but I had a good time with it. Next, the Stephen King book I read this month, and that is The Outsider by Stephen King. I love this book. I really, really like this book. This is a newer book from King. And I really just like where he's at as a writer. You do see a lot of things that are kind of similar to older King books and King stories, but there is a maturity in the writing that I think is really commendable. I think I really love the character of Holly Gibney, and she is kind of like the detective character that King is really working on recently, and he's put her in a bunch of stories. And I really like that character because she seems to be the most healthy detective ever written, in that she like she doesn't love guns, she goes to therapy, and she does all this stuff to look after her mental health. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is like a more mature King character that really is kind of gripping I think like the legacy of King and really talking about where he's at as a writer right now. So I really, really love Holly Gibney. And The Outsider is a disturbing book. Like, there are some really creepy sequences in this book. So I think Stephen King still has it and can still do a really great book with some great characters in it. It's a Stephen King book, so there are a few iffy parts of this book. I'm not gonna lie, especially when he was dealing with some characters of color. I was kind of like, I know what you're doing here, and you're trying to be playful and play around, but I don't know if it 100% worked. So, but overall, I think this is a great book. A lot of scary sequences, very, very disturbing. Like, the central crime case at the center of this is very disturbing. And yeah, I quite enjoyed The Outsider and would definitely recommend it. So if you haven't picked that one up, I would recommend that you do so. Cats. And I listened to that one on audiobook. Next up, one that I absolutely hated, which was The Final Book Girls by Riley Sager. I will never read a Riley Sager book again. I gave this one a 1 star, one of my least favorite reads in a long time. Absolute garbage in my opinion. I think there's a good novella inside of here because I really did not mind. I really didn't mind the flashback segments that are in this. There's like flashbacks to what happened to her before she became the quote-unquote final girl. But everything else with her as like an adult and what it tries to say about trauma and like mental illness and all this stuff, I think it does a really piss poor job at. And I don't think I would like Riley Sager as a person after reading this book. He just seems like kind of insufferable. One of the least favorite things in this book is that it does seem to kind of like criminalize, people who are like homeless and in a way that's like real gross. So yeah, screw you, Riley Sager. I'll never read one of your books again. Never read The Final Girls. It sucks. Next up, I DNF'd Psycho 2 by Robert Bloch. He wrote this before the movie Psycho 2. Now, the movie Psycho 2 is actually pretty damn great. But the book, no. It's bad. It's fucking bad. It is. Woof. It is bad. It seems to be a book that Robert Bloch wrote so terribly that he wanted to make sure he tanked the franchise and no one else ever touched Psycho again. It didn't work because they made the movie and the movie's actually great. This book is not. Stay away from it. If you have it, just kick it down a flight of stairs. It's a terrible book. I listened to quite a few short story collections this month. Let's talk about Full Throttle by Joe Hill. I absolutely loved it. This was my first ever Joe Hill book. You know, I read plenty of Stephen King books. I've never picked up a Joe Hill book. I own a few, but I just haven't read them yet. And I figured this would be a great place to start. And this is a newer short story collection. Now, I had seen quite a few of these short stories adapted. Because there's been, there was like Into Tall Grass, which was not a good movie. And also, I think is the weakest story of the bunch. But that was adapted into a Netflix movie. And then there was quite a few episodes of the Shudder TV series Creepshow that actually adapted some of the stories in this collection. But overall, I loved this collection. I had a great time reading it. I think it really runs the gamut of different characters, different voices for every character, and it was really, really good. I am really interested and excited to kind of explore more of Joe Hill's work, and I just think he seems to be a pretty damn great writer. Two of the short stories in this collection, Fawn and Late Returns, are two of my favorite short stories that I've ever read. Like, they were absolutely amazing short stories. And really, really makes this a collection to buy and seek out. I had a wonderful time reading Full Throttle. My first Joe Hill, but certainly not my last. He's really good at getting emotions out of you. I loved this short story collection. Highest recommend there. The only thing that kept me from ranking it 5 stars is I honestly don't like In the Tall Grass. It's just I don't like that story. I don't think it works very well, but it's the only stinker in just a book of winners. So that was Full Throttle. And then I read Books of Blood, Volume 4. Really small little book. Another one that was like near perfect. The very last story in this is a bit. It's disturbing, and I was really on the fence as to whether or not I think it was good or not, and if it all completely worked. But it certainly sticks with you, and it certainly is disturbing. So on a reread, this one might be a perfect collection. The last story is the only one that's a bit whoa. But it's supposed to be, right? Like with Clive Barker, it's always an interesting thing. I absolutely love this cover. I am so glad I found these British covers that have the old school Clive Barker esque things. Clive Barker is such an impressive writer because he can write something like The Body Politic, which is literally like your hands come to life and betray you. And that's such a dumb idea. Like, really, it's a really dumb idea. But when Clive Barker writes the hell out of it, you're like, damn, that was a perfect story. That story was absolutely amazing. I am fully on board with this. And I think that's one of the strengths of short stories is that sometimes you can get a really dumb or silly idea. But if you write the hell out of it, man, it can be a great story. And so I think Clive Barker's Books of Blood, fantastic. Another fantastic Clive Barker collection. One of my favorite writers overall. I just absolutely love him. Next up, I read a Zebra book, which is a Ronald Kelly's Something Out There. This is a fascinating book. I would say it's one of those books, similar, I read the Sherlock Holmes book earlier this month, and it is a book where it starts off very slow and methodical, and I thought like this was going to be like something else, but by the end, it becomes by the end of this book, it literally becomes a men's adventure book where the monster is the hero. Because, so what happens is there is this area of this Appalachian mountain, and there is this creature who roams the mountainside, and he looks after the nature and all of the environment and the wildlife inside of this little specific spot of the Appalachian Mountains. And it's called the Darken. And there is this old man who has lived there all his life, and he has this agreement with the Darken to keep people out of his area. And if he kind of makes sure that the land is clear and people don't trespass on it, then they will have like a good relationship, and the Darken will leave him alone, and the old man will be like good to go. And of course, we find out evil capitalists want to come in and take out and mine and destroy this precious landscape and take it all over. And the only thing stopping them is the Darken. Yeah, the monster's the hero of this, 100%. You do not feel bad about the people that the monster murders. And there is like some crazy kills in this, and also some like crazy monster appearances, because it's like a shape-shifting monster, so it can, whatever it can take from the environment, it can like shift and change into whatever it kind of sees. And it does things like as simple as, you know, turning into a murderous hockey player because it finds a sports magazine, to literally becoming dinosaurs and like just killing a bunch of people as dinosaurs. It's absolutely crazy and wild, and it starts off so slow and methodical. This is the second Ronald Kelly book I've read, and I really do enjoy Ronald Kelly as a writer. I do think one of his flaws is he just can't kill off of his main cast. He seems to be somebody who falls in love with his main characters, and for good reason. He writes really good characters, and he writes pretty three-dimensional characters, and he just kind of has difficulty killing them off, it seems, because by the end of the book they're all fine, but because of the rampage this creature causes, they have to kind of be sidelined for the third act of this book, kind of, where they're all kind of in a cave while the Darken like goes on rampage and kills all the bad guys. And it's just like one of those things where it's great to read, and I don't hate it. It just takes the horror elements down a smidge because it doesn't really fully commit to the, the heartbreak and the horrific things that can happen to characters you love. I always think of, I see a lot of Stephen King and Ronald Kelly, but where Stephen King will kill off characters that you love, he has no one is safe in a Stephen King book. Stephen King will kill people off all the time. Ronald Kelly, I don't, just seems to can't do it. I think he's just like kind of like one of those people who are like, no, I like this character too much. I'm not gonna. I put this character through enough harm. Like I want this character to live, and it's like it's sweet. It just takes away the horror elements a little bit. But that final act where it's just monster mayhem for like, I would say like 50 pages of just pure monster mayhem, just killing mercenaries. It's kind of amazing. It is kind of absolutely amazing. It does get a little bit questionable at parts. There is like a few like, oh, you don't know how to write other races that well, Ronald Kelly. It's not like super offensive or mean spirited. It just seems to be like a little bit cringy at times. Where you're like, oh, I don't think the person would sound like that, Ronald Kelly, but okay. But other than that, I had a great time with this. The Darkin is a great antagonist. It's basically what if Pennywise was good and Pennywise just kills capitalists, and it's like, yep, welcome to the resistance, Comrade Darkin. There is an audiobook of this which is called The Darkin. So the original book is called Something Out There, but they changed it when they released it on audio to The Darkin. So if you do want to find this on audio format, you can find it there at The Darkin on Audible. So just thought that was interesting to say. Certainly not what I expected, but did have a great time with it. The next book I read, Dark Harvest, which is this short little novella, and it is really great to listen to around this time of year. There is a great sense of atmosphere here, and I did really love the central story going on. Essentially, it's like this town where every year there is this pumpkin man who comes to life in one of the forests, and it has to get from the forest to the church, and if it gets to that spot, the county will not have a good harvest. So, and will be the death of the town. So they've made a deal, someone in the town has made a deal with some dark force that says like, hey, we get all these kids to kill this creature, and if they kill this creature before it reaches the church every year, then we will have a good, healthy town. And I had a great time with this. It's really short. It takes a little bit to get into the writing style for this one, I found, but once it kind of got on its level, I had a great time. They're making a movie out of this, and I don't know how they're going to do it, or at least I don't know how they're going to do this story justice, because I think a lot of this story is not dialogue driven. It's very much an atmosphere, plot driven story, and unless they really go heavy on doing an atmospheric film with very little dialogue, I don't know if it'll work, because this is a really good story, but it's a quiet story, and it's not very, it's not dialogue heavy, that much is for certain. So I'm kind of skeptical about the adaptation that I know is coming out soon, but just as a book, it's just fantastic. It's really, really good, and really high recommend for this time of year. Next, another short story collection is Haunted Castle, which is the Penguin Classics collection of Ray Russell's Gothic tales. Yeah, guys, I read a Penguin Classic. Whoa, amazing. Andrew's reading something that's not trash. But don't be too excited, because I'm going to talk about trashy stuff in a bit. But, this is just a bunch of classic horror Gothic tales that I absolutely adored. Ray Russell is a fantastic writer. And Mr. Sardonicus is mwah, mwah. Mr. Sardonicus is, again, one of my favorite short stories I think I've ever encountered. I love Mr. Sardonicus a whole lot, so I cannot give this collection anything but praise. If you're a fan of Gothic literature, I would 100% recommend this, as it is fantastic. And a lot of the other stories that aren't Mr. Sardonicus are also great. I just think Sardonicus is the king. It's the first one in here, and it is mwah, mwah, really, really good. I did like Sanguinarius and Sagittarius and the other littler short stories that come along as well. It's just, it's hard to beat one of the best short stories ever written, which is Mr. Sardonicus. And I love Mr. Sardonicus, and I can't wait to watch the movie. I've never seen the movie. I thought it was only a movie, and then I discovered it was a story, and not only was it a story, it's one of the best stories ever written. I love it. I love Mr. Sardonicus. Call me Mr. Sardonistan. Mr. Sardonistan. That's me. Next up, I'm sorry, this video kind of sucks, doesn't it? I don't think I'm doing a good job with this video. Oh well, maybe my energy will be better in another video. Please don't leave me. Next up, Night Warriors by Graham Masterton. Graham Masterton. So I have never read a Graham Masterton book. That was the first one I've ever read, and I actually love the premise of the series, so I bought like the first 3 books. I haven't bought the like 4th and 5th, which are written like more modern day-ish stuff, but I bought all of his like the vintage ones in there. Now I thought that this was a rip-off, quote unquote, not really a rip-off, but I thought this was going to be like a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors kind of rip-off, and it was. There were definitely elements of Dream Warriors in here, but it was actually released before the film came out. So it was released in January of 1987, and Dream Warriors came out later on in the year. So I don't know if the title Night Warriors is a play off of Dream Warriors. It's kind of hard to tell. I would imagine so, because, there is the marketing lead up to that new Freddy Krueger film. So like I gotta imagine like they were kind of trying to ride off the waves of Nightmare on Elm Street, because it is a story about a dream demon and people going into dreams and like fighting off this demon, and it's a mix of like some pretty dark horror stuff and some pretty amazing fantasy stuff. It is very much a dark fantasy. This is my first Graham Masterton book. I fucking love this book. I really, really like this book. And I really like the characters in this book. It does have some dated elements. Like I said, it shouldn't be too surprised. 1987. But I do think it dates better than some Stephen King books of the era. And I do think some of the dated elements can be read as not dated elements. So, for example, there is one of the characters who's kind of like the lead character in this book, who is like this drunk guy. And there are a few instances of people and him thinking of like, oh no, I can't be seen as gay. They don't say gay, they say the F-bomb. They say the slur, which sucks, but only appears twice in the book. But, it's still more than it should. But to me, it actually read like the character who's using that language of paraphernalia you could have a queer reading on him, because he doesn't seem to have like any interest in the opposite sex as far as like for romantic reasons or even like lustful reasons. And you find out his ex-wife is somebody who was actually a lesbian. She was in the closet. And they find that out when they go to her dreams, and they go, oh, this explains a lot. And they aren't hateful towards her. They still save her. They still like her. Even when they get out of the dreams, he still goes up and like says to his ex-wife, he's like, I did love you and all this stuff. So it's like, that start was not hateful at all. So I was kind of like, that's interesting. Could it be a scenario where these two, like, because this used to happen in the 50s a lot with actors, where like an actor would be like in the 50s would be like gay, and he would get together with and get married to a woman who was also gay, and they would then like in the 50s they would just do that for like movie stars and stuff like that, where they would both be just living this public life so that they could still get roles and stuff like that, because the world was super prejudiced. And I kind of got the reading that could have been what was going on with that character in this book. I have not read enough Graham Masterton to say whether or not maybe I'm just overthinking it. But, I think that is an element that is there, and I did like that element quite a bit, and I did like all the characters in this quite a bit, which again for vintage horror is a bit of a surprise, because let me tell you, most men in vintage horror suck. So the fact that I was okay with a man in a vintage horror book was a bit of a surprise. So yeah, I thought it was really inventive. Now I will warn, when I say that there's like the horror is on the darker side, there are 2 instances of sexual assault in this. I did not find it distasteful. Like, I felt like it was done well. It was very disturbing, obviously, because that is a disturbing occurrence in real life. But if you are, if that's one of your triggers, just be forewarned before going into this book that there are some instances of sexual assault, because basically what happens is this night demon sexually assaults women. And that's one of the reasons why that's how he like reproduces just his more dream demons. And it's very disturbing, but I think it's like disturbing with a point. Now, again, I would be interested to hear what other people think. But yeah, I thought it worked in the story. And was obviously very horrifying, but I think it, in the context of the story, was utilized well. But it's a very touchy subject and one that's really hard to do well. So I would be interested to hear what other people think. But overall, The Night Warriors, this dark fantasy novel where people go into dreams and they become warriors. And it's very fascinating. It's got this very big, complicated power system for all the characters. And me as a nerd was just eating this shit up and was just like, yes, give me more D&D bullshit when they're in the dreams. Yes, yum, yum, yum. I loved it. I loved the fantasy elements. I had a great time. And also, there is quite a bit of animal attacks elements, because these little eels do appear in the real world. And there is one of the most hilarious moments I've had in a book is when these eel creatures attack a few policemen. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but when that event happened and how it happened, I laughed out loud, and I was in a crowded park and people were giving me looks, and I was like, well, too bad. This was a funny scene. So yeah, I'm going to read the rest of this series hopefully soon. Probably starting them in November, because I have most of my October kind of planned out. But yeah, have you read Night Warriors? I always call it Dream Warriors. Have you read Night Warriors by Graham Masterton? Have you read other Graham Masterton books? Is he secretly progressive, or is he super regressive and I just had a bad reading on this? I would love to hear. My final book that I read was 100% a trashy book. It's literally under a series called VHS Trash, written by this author, and this is the book Ogre by Brian G. Barry. Now, if you want to know whether or not you would like this book, I would invite you to look at the cover that I put up here, and then if you like that cover, you will like the book, because the book is 100%. It's in a series of books he's writing called VHS Trash. So that's what you expect, and if you like the cover, that's exactly what it is, and it delivers on it, and it's brutal. It's actually pretty well written. I think the prose has some interesting elements in it that I was not really expecting to get. There are some effective horror moments in here. Horror is a bit on the extreme side. As you can tell from that cover, them childrens get mushed up by big monster. So if you don't like children dying, stay away from this book. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's an ogre attacks a bunch of people, and a bunch of like a horrific shit happens when an ogre is loose in a summer camp. Why did I read this now? Because we're going into spooky season? I don't know. I just really felt like sitting down to read a book about an ogre massacring people. And guess what? That's exactly what this was. So, what did you guys read this month? Did you read any great books this month? Did you read any of the books that I've read this month and completely disagree with my takes? Would love to hear in the comments. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. Goodbye.